something so precious in your hands, thinking it was safe, only to watch it slip right through your fingers? You thought I'd always be here, thought my heart would always be open, my soul would always be accessible, my love would always be unconditional. No matter how reckless you handled it, grace has an expiration date when it's taken for granted. It's not that I wanted to walk away. It's not that I didn't pray for change, for a shift, for a sign that what I was holding on to still had life. I stayed longer than I should have, hoping that love would heal what pride was determined to destroy. I bent, I stretched, I made excuses. I covered wounds with hope, thinking that maybe, just maybe, you'd see the value of what was in front of you before it was too late. But grace, even grace, has limits. And when it's taken for granted, when it's handled recklessly like it's owed, instead of honored like it's a gift, it reaches a breaking point. You thought my love was endless. You thought my heart was a revolving door that no matter how many times you walked away, you could always walk back in. You mistook my patience for permanence. You assumed that because I forgave, because I stayed, because I kept giving chances, I would always be there to catch you when you fell, to clean up the mess, to keep pouring into something that never poured back. But let me tell you something about grace. It may be patient, it may be kind, but it is not blind. It sees when it's being mishandled. It recognizes when it's being taken advantage of. It knows when it's time to stop making excuses for what refuses to grow. I was your safe place, the one who saw the best in you, even when you couldn't see it in yourself. I carried you in prayers you never even knew about. I covered you when life tried to break you. I stood in the gap when you didn't have the strength to fight for yourself, and you mistook that for weakness. You mistook that for desperation. But what you didn't realize is that grace isn't a sign of weakness. It's a reflection of strength. It takes strength to love someone despite their flaws. It takes strength to hold on when everything in you is telling you to let go. It takes strength to keep believing, to keep hoping, to keep sacrificing. But strength has boundaries. Even the strongest love will retreat when it's been undervalued for too long. You thought I'd always be here. Thought my love would always wait. Thought I would always be the one to reach out first, to mend what was broken, to apologize for things I didn't do, just to keep the peace. You got comfortable. You got careless. You let my heart sit in neglect while you chased distractions. You fed my fears while starving my faith in us. And now you're left with the aftermath of what happens when grace walks away. You see, grace never leaves suddenly. It lingers. It gives warnings. It gives opportunities to change, to make things right. But when it leaves, it doesn't look back. One day you'll wake up and reach for me, and I won't be there. One day you'll hear my name and realize it no longer belongs to you. One day you'll feel the absence of what you took for granted, and it'll hit you in a way that words can't explain. Because the kind of love I gave you, the kind of grace I extended, isn't something you just find anywhere. You'll go searching for it in familiar places, in familiar faces, but it won't be the same. Because it wasn't just love. It was me. It was my spirit, my covering, my sacrifice, my devotion. And you lost that. You will remember the way I loved you, the way I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. You will remember the warmth of my presence, the safety of my prayers, the depth of my loyalty, and it will haunt you, not because I want it to, but because that's what happens when you mishandle something rare. That's what happens when you assume something will always be there instead of cherishing it while you have it. Maybe right now you don't feel it. Maybe you're still caught up in your distractions, still numbing yourself from the reality of what you let slip through your fingers. But one day, that numbness will wear off. One day, the weight of my absence will settle in. And that's when you'll understand. You didn't just lose a person. You lost favor. You lost covering. You lost someone who would have gone to war for you, someone who stood in the fire with you, someone who saw you in ways you'd even see yourself. And the hardest part, there's no getting that back. Because grace, once it's gone, doesn't return to where it was misused. It doesn't come back to the hands that wasted it. It moves forward. It flourishes elsewhere. It finds a place where it is honored. And that's exactly what I did. Love will endure storms, but it won't beg to be sheltered from the rain. I stayed through the downpours, through the winds that threatened to tear us apart. I held on when the skies turned dark, when everything in me whispered that I should walk away. I believed in the foundation we built, believed that no matter how heavy the storm, we would find a way to stand. I let the rain soak my skin, let the cold bite at my bones, telling myself that love was worth enduring. And it was, for a time. But love isn't meant to drown in the very storm it's trying to survive. I was willing to fight, willing to weather the seasons, willing to stand in the middle of the storm without an umbrella, because love isn't about perfect conditions. It's about commitment. But what I wasn't willing to do was beg to be covered while I was standing in the rain. Love is supposed to be shelter. Love is supposed to hold you close when the winds are too strong, when the weight of the world is pressing in. Love is supposed to watch you shiver, watch you drown, watch you suffer while pretending not to notice. And yet, that's exactly what happened. I stayed. I stayed when I felt unseen, when my love became an afterthought, when my presence was met with indifference. I stood in the storm, waiting for you to reach for me, waiting for you to say, come inside. You don't have to do this alone, but you didn't. You let me stand there, soaked in my own tears, shaking from the cold of your absence. And still I stayed, because love is patient. Love is kind. Love believes. Love hopes. Love endures. But even love has limits when it's left outside too long. I realized that I was the only one fighting against the storm, while used to dry beneath a shelter I wasn't invited into. I realized that I had spent so much time proving my love, proving my loyalty, proving my worth, that I didn't see how little you were willing to do the same. Love shouldn't have to prove itself. Love is felt. Love is shown. Love moves. But you let me stand in the rain until my love wore thin, until my hope grew tired, until my heart had no choice but to seek warmth elsewhere. And now, you're left with the silence that follows a storm you never thought would pass. You're left with the echoes of my absence, the emptiness of what used to be full. Because love will endure storms, but it will not beg to be sheltered from the rain. It will not stand outside forever, waiting to be let in. It will not sacrifice itself for someone who refuses to provide a place for it to rest. One day, you will feel it. The coldness of my absence, the void of what I once was to you. You will look for me in places I no longer belong, in arms that cannot hold you the way I did, in spaces where my presence used to bring light. And that's when you'll understand. Love didn't leave because it was weak. It left because it was strong enough to know it deserved more. My worth isn't measured by how much I endure, but by how much I honor what God placed inside me. For too long, I thought love was proven in endurance. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, if I could just be more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, then eventually things would change. I measured my love by my ability to withstand the weight of neglect, the strain of disappointment, the ache of being unseen. I told myself that love meant sacrifice, But I forgot that love should never require the sacrifice of myself. I poured everything I had into something that never poured back. I gave until I was empty, thinking that if I just endured a little more, if I just proved my love through my suffering, then one day you would see my worth, but I was wrong. Love isn't a test of endurance. Love doesn't ask you to break yourself to prove you belong. And worth isn't in how much you can tolerate before you finally walk away. Worth is in knowing when to stop settling for less than what God has called you to. God didn't create me to be an option. He didn't shape me to be overlooked, ignored, or mishandled. He placed something powerful inside of me, something sacred, something divine, and for too long, I let myself believe that love required me to shrink, to make myself small, to be easy to handle, easy to dismiss. I let my endurance become my prison, thinking that if I just held on long enough, you would finally give me the love I had been begging for. But I see it now. Begging for love is an insult to the God who created me. I am not measured by how much I can withstand. I am measured by how much I honor who I am, by how much I protect what God has placed inside me. And when I look back, I see how much I abandoned myself just to keep you close. I silenced my own needs so I wouldn't be too much. I settled for breadcrumbs when I was worthy of a feast. I allowed myself to be handled like I was common, when I was anything but. And now that I am gone, now that my presence has turned into absence, I hope you feel the weight of what you lost. Because I was never weak for loving you. I was never foolish for believing in us, but I would have been weak to stay, weak to keep allowing you to diminish what God had placed in me. And I refuse to live a life where I am only valued when it's convenient. I refuse to keep proving my worth to someone who should have seen it from the start. One day you will look back and realize that what I gave you wasn't ordinary. That the way I loved you, prayed for you, believed in you, it wasn't something you can replace. You will remember the moments when I stayed, when I should have left. The times I gave you grace when you didn't deserve it. The way I fought for something you never protected. And that's when it will hit you. You didn't just lose a person. You lost someone who was willing to stand beside you through it all. And that kind of loss, it doesn't just go away. It lingers. It haunts. It reminds you of everything you took for granted. I am no longer in a place where my worth is defined by endurance. I'm in a place where my worth is honored, where my love is reciprocated, where what God placed inside me is cherished. And you are left with the realization that you had something rare, something real, something heaven sent, and you let it slip through your fingers. You look for me in places I no longer dwell, and people who can't match my spirit. At first, you won't notice the shift. You'll go about your days like nothing's changed, telling yourself that I was just another chapter, something you can flip back to when you're ready. You'll convince yourself that my absence is temporary, that time will soften whatever pain lingers in the air. But time won't erase what you lost. Time won't fill the spaces I used to occupy. Time won't replace the prayers I whispered over you in silence, the covering I gave you when you didn't even realize you needed it. You'll walk into rooms that once held my laughter and feel the weight of the quiet. You'll pick up your phone to call me, only to remember that my voice is no longer yours to hear. You'll catch yourself reaching for me in moments of weakness, in times when life feels too heavy, expecting me to be there like I always was. But I won't be. And that realization, it will shake you in ways you never expected. You look for me in the arms of someone else, thinking that love is easily replaced. You'll chase temporary distractions, thinking they'll fill the void. But what you had with me wasn't just about presence. It was about connection. It was about spirit. And spirit can't be duplicated. You can find someone who looks like me, someone who moves like me, someone who even tries to love like me. Because what I gave you was more than love. It was covering, it was safety, it was something rare. You'll sit across from someone new, watching them smile, listening to their words, and you'll wonder why it doesn't feel the same, why their touch doesn't spark what mine did, why their laughter doesn't echo the same way, why their presence doesn't soothe the way mine used to. And that's when it will hit you. What you lost wasn't just a relationship. What you lost was a divine connection, something deeper than surface level affection, something more than just moments shared. You will go searching for pieces of me in places I no longer exist. You will replay memories like old songs, trying to find comfort in what was. You will hear my name and feel something tighten in your chest because it will remind you of what you let slip through your fingers. And you will realize too late that I was not something replaceable. That love like mine doesn't come around twice. That you had something sacred and you didn't know how to cherish it. And the hardest part won't be missing me. It won't be the loneliness, the silence, the realization that you lost something rare. The hardest part will be knowing that someone else, somewhere else, is receiving the love you once had. That someone else is standing where you should have been, being held in the way you once were, being cherished in the way you failed to do. That someone else will get the prayers, the devotion, the kind of love that doesn't just fill spaces, but transforms them. You'll want to go back. You'll want to undo the damage, to retrace your steps, to find a way to bring me back to where you left me, but I won't be there. Because I've moved on. Because I've stepped into a new season where my love is honored, where my spirit is matched, where what I bring is seen as a blessing, not a burden. And you'll be left searching for something you will never find again. Losing me wasn't just losing a person. It was losing favor, covering, and divine love. At first, you thought it was just space, just distance, just time. You convinced yourself that my absence was temporary, that I was just another presence in your life that could be replaced. That love would always wait for you the way I did. But what you lost wasn't just companionship. It wasn't just the sound of my laughter in the quiet moments or the warmth of my body beside you. You lost something greater. You lost the favor that was tied to my presence. You lost the covering that came with my love. You lost the kind of connection that wasn't just between two people, but between you, me, and God. You didn't realize that my love was more than words, more than actions. It was intercession. It was warfare. It was the kind of love that fought battles you never even knew existed. When life tried to break you, I stood in the gap. When doors seemed closed, I prayed until they opened. When you doubted yourself, I spoke life into you. You didn't just have a woman who loved you. You had a woman who covered you, a woman who spoke your name in her prayers, who asked God to protect you, to elevate you, to give you wisdom and strength. You didn't just have love, you had favor. But favor has a cost. Favor isn't something you mishandle. It isn't something you take for granted, assuming it will always be there, no matter how carelessly you treat it. Favor responds to honor. And you stopped honoring what you had. You stopped protecting what was sent to bless you. You mistook divine love for something ordinary, something that could be replaced, something that would always be waiting for you, no matter how many times you neglected it. But love, real love, doesn't thrive in neglect. It doesn't flourish in places where it is not cherished. And so it left. I left. With me, the favor that was tied to my presence went too. You thought my love was just about what I could give, what I could do, how much I could endure. But what I carried was more than that. I carried wisdom. I carried discernment. I carried an anointing that made everything around me better, including you. You didn't just lose a person. You lost access to a blessing. And now you're starting to feel it. The peace you once had, it's gone. The clarity you once felt, it's clouded. The opportunities that used to come so easily, they seem harder now. That's what happens when you lose divine love. It leaves a void that nothing else can fill. You will go searching for what you lost. You will try to find another love that feels the same, another presence that brings you the same kind of covering, another heart that prays for you without you even having to ask. But you won't find it. Because what I gave wasn't just love. It was an extension of God's grace over your life. And when you lost me, you lost the favor that was attached to my presence. One day you will sit in the silence and realize that it was never just about losing me. It was about losing the security that came with my love, the safety of knowing that someone was always praying for you, always rooting for you, always standing in the spiritual battlefield on your behalf. You will feel the absence of my covering, the loss of my prayers, the missing presence of divine love that once surrounded you. And that absence, it will speak louder than any words I could ever say. What I lost in you, God is replacing with something greater. For a long time, I thought losing you was losing everything. I thought walking away meant leaving behind something I would never find again. I thought love was about holding on even when it hurt, even when it drained me, even when I knew deep down that I was the only one fighting to keep it alive. I let myself believe that if I just endured, if I just poured more of myself in, if I just gave you more grace, eventually you would see my worth. But I see it now. God never meant for me to beg for, was already mine to receive freely. I thought I was losing love when I walked away, but I was only losing a version of love that was never meant to keep me whole. I was losing the burden of proving myself to someone who never saw me clearly. I was losing the weight of waiting for love that should have never had conditions. I was losing a place that had grown too small for the person God was calling me to be. What I lost in you was never meant to sustain me. And that's why God is replacing it with something greater. You thought I would be broken without you. Thought I would spend my days longing for what we had. Hoping you would come back and fill the space you left behind. But what you don't realize is that God doesn't allow his children to suffer loss without purpose. When he removes something, it's only because he's making room for something better. And that's exactly what he's doing in my life. The love I fought for with you, he's giving me a love I don't have to beg for. The peace I sacrificed trying to hold on to us, he's restoring it in ways I never imagined. The time I spent pouring into someone who didn't pour back into me, he's redeeming it with abundance, with joy, with love that flows freely. I no longer see you as something I lost. I see you as something God removed so that I could gain something greater. And that's what will hurt you the most. Not just that I moved on, not just that I healed, but that I grew. That I didn't stay in the space where you left me. That I didn't shrink in my pain, but expanded in my healing. That I took every tear, every heartbreak, every moment of neglect, and let God turn it into strength. One day you will realize that what you lost in me was irreplaceable. You will try to find my love in places it was never meant to exist. You will search for the comfort I gave, for the covering I provided, for the depth of love that you never had to earn. But you will never find it. Because what I carried was meant for someone who knew how to cherish it. And God is making sure that the love I gave so freely is placed in the hands of someone who knows how to handle it with care. You will feel the absence of what I was in your life. You will see me walking in joy, in peace, in love that doesn't require suffering as proof. And it will hit you. You lost more than a woman. You lost the favor that came with my presence. You lost the prayers that covered you in silence. You lost the kind of love that changes a man, that elevates him, that helps him become everything God called him to be, and you lost it because you thought I would never leave. But I did. And God is replacing everything I lost in you with something greater, with love that doesn't make me question my worth, with peace that doesn't come with conditions, with a future that reflects everything He had for me all along. And while you sit in the realization of what you let slip away, I will be too busy walking in the blessings that were always meant for me. This time, I won't have to beg to be loved, right? I'll be cherished, seen, and home. I spent too much time trying to make myself small so I could fit into a love that was never meant to hold me. I twisted myself into versions that felt easier for you to handle, thinking that if I just softened my edges, dimmed my light, quieted my spirit, then maybe, just maybe, you would finally love me the way I deserved. But love that must be begged for is not love at all. Love that must be proven through suffering is not love that comes from God. I won't do it anymore. I won't spend another moment trying to convince someone to see what was in front of them all along. I won't sit in the empty spaces you left behind, wondering if I should have done more, been more, waited longer. Because the truth is, I was always enough. I was more than enough. I was the kind of love that covered, the kind of love that prayed, the kind of love that stood in the gap when you didn't even know there was a battle being fought for you. And still you handled me like I was ordinary. Like I was something you could put on a shelf and reach for when it was convenient. Like my heart was something you could gamble with and expect to keep winning. But I have learned that love should not be a war where only one person is fighting. I have learned that real love doesn't ask you to beg for attention, for effort, for consistency. I have learned that love should feel like home, not like a battlefield, not like a test I have to keep passing to be worthy of something that should have been freely given. And this time, I won't have to beg. I won't have to chase after text messages, wondering if I matter. I won't have to shrink myself to fit inside someone else's lack of readiness. I won't have to hold on to false hope, waiting for love to become what it should have been from the beginning. This time, love will be solid. It will be sure. It will be intentional. It will be safe. I will be cherished in ways you never could. I will be held in a love that does not require me to prove my worth over and over again. I will be covered in a way that makes me feel seen, makes me feel valued, makes me feel like I was never too much. I was just waiting for the right heart to recognize my presence as a blessing. And that is what will hurt you the most. Not just that I left, but that I left and found something better, that I walked away from the uncertainty, the inconsistency, the emotional starvation, and I walked into something that feels like home, something that welcomes me in without conditions, something that holds me without hesitation. You will look back and wonder why you didn't see it sooner, why you didn't cherish what was always standing right in front of you, why you didn't give the love that was so freely given to you. And the answer will be simple. You thought I would always be there. You thought love like mine was easy to find, easy to replace, easy to call back whenever you are ready to do right. But love like mine, it doesn't wait forever. It doesn't sit around hoping for the day someone finally realizes its value. Love like mine finds a place where it is cherished, honored, and respected. So while you search for the feeling I gave you in people who will never measure up, I will be resting in a love that does not require me to beg. I will be standing in the arms of someone who looks at me and sees home. I will be experiencing the kind of love I should have had all along, one that is steady, unwavering, and given freely. And when you realize what you lost, when the weight of my absence finally settles in, it will be too late. Because I will be too busy living in the love that was always meant for me. So, I let go. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally realized my worth isn't measured by how much I can endure. It's measured by how much I can honor what God placed inside me. And I refuse, do you hear me? I refuse to let my calling be suffocated by someone who was never meant to hold it. You lost me. And maybe that don't mean much to you today. Maybe you brush it off, call it my emotions, act like you'll find another. But one day, you'll feel it. Not in the silence of an empty room, but in the echoes of everything I ever spoke over you, everything I ever prayed for you, everything I ever was to you. You'll look for me in places I no longer dwell, in people who can't match my spirit, in moments that no longer exist, and that's when you'll know. Losing me wasn't just losing a person. It was losing favor, losing covering, losing love that was rare, deep, and divine. But don't get it twisted. I'm not bitter. I'm better. Because what I lost in you, God is replacing with something greater. And this time, I won't have to beg to be loved right. This time, I'll be cherished. This time, you'll be seen. This time, I'll be home. So go ahead, act like it don't hurt. But just know, one day, it will.